My name is Taylor, and I never thought a simple family backyard BBQ would turn my world upside down. We were all there that sunny Saturday, the smell of burgers on the grill, kids running around, everyone laughing like it was just another normal get-together at my in-laws' house. My 9-year-old daughter Avery had spent days working on a new drawing she was so proud of, and she couldn't wait to show it off. She held it up with that big excited smile, eyes shining, waiting for someone to say something nice. But then my mother-in-law opened her mouth right there in front of the entire family and half the neighborhood, loud enough for everyone to hear. She looked straight at Avery and said those words that still make my stomach drop. They called my daughter not normal. In public. In front of everyone. She saw everything. Every comment. Every insult. I was shaking. But my husband, he didn't argue. He exposed them. And they weren't ready. If you've ever dealt with a toxic mother-in-law who crossed the line with your kids, hit that like button right now and subscribe so you don't miss how this story ends. Trust me, you're going to want to see what happened next. The afternoon sun was still high when Patricia Reynolds decided to speak up louder than the grill sizzling behind her. She stood in the middle of the backyard with a plate in one hand and pointed directly at Avery, who was holding up her colorful drawing for everyone to see. "Look at this mess," Patricia said, her voice carrying across the entire gathering so that even the neighbors chatting by the fence could hear clearly. "This child is clearly not normal. A 9-year-old's room shouldn't look like a tornado hit it every single day just because of some silly pictures she keeps making instead of doing normal kid things." Several heads turned immediately. Neighbors who had come over for the BBQ shifted uncomfortably on their feet, but a few family members nodded along in agreement. Erin Reynolds, my husband's sister, laughed lightly and added right away, "Yeah, she definitely needs more structure than that." The other kids don't act like this at all. Brandon Reynolds, my husband's brother, stood nearby, sipping his drink and muttered loud enough for the group to catch. "Something's off with kids these days if they can't even keep things tidy without being reminded 100 times. Avery froze right there on the grass, her small hands still gripping the edges of the paper so tightly that her knuckles turned white. She looked from one face to another as more comments floated around the group without anyone stopping to think how it might sound to a 9-year-old. Someone mentioned that maybe she needed a stricter routine at home to build better habits. Another person said it wasn't healthy for a girl her age to be so absorbed in drawing instead of playing organized sports like the cousins did every weekend. The words kept coming, each one landing heavier than the last, all while Avery stood completely exposed in front of more than 20 people who were supposed to be there to support her. I felt my hands start to tremble as I watched my daughter's proud smile disappear in an instant. I wanted to step forward and say something sharp to shut it down, but the shock of hearing those words spoken so openly kept me rooted in place for those first few painful seconds. Justin stood a few feet away with his arms crossed tightly over his chest, his eyes locked on his mother the whole time. He didn't raise his voice at all. He didn't interrupt or try to argue in front of everyone. He simply watched everything unfold with a quiet intensity that I had rarely seen in him before that moment. Patricia kept going without missing a beat, gesturing toward the scattered crayons and papers on the patio table as if they proved some bigger point she had been wanting to make for a long time. More guests chuckled or offered their own opinions, turning the moment into a casual group discussion about how some children just weren't being raised with the right discipline these days. Avery's eyes began to well up with tears, but she blinked hard several times and tried her best to keep holding the drawing steady in front of her chest. The conversation finally shifted after what felt like forever, with people moving back toward the food tables and games as if nothing major had happened. But the damage was already spreading fast through the backyard. Phones came out as a few relatives snapped quick photos of Avery still standing there, and I caught sight of Erin typing quickly on her screen, probably sharing the whole exchange in the family group chat for everyone else to see. By the time the BBQ started to wind down an hour later, the backyard felt noticeably smaller, and the laughter around us sounded much more forced than before. We helped clean up the tables and chairs in heavy silence, loading everything into the car while Avery stayed unusually quiet in the back seat the entire short drive home. The weight of what had just happened sat heavy in every inch of space between the three of us. The living room lights felt too bright as soon as we walked through the front door and Avery asked to borrow my tablet to check something. She kept scrolling through the family group chat that Aaron had shared earlier, reading each new comment aloud in a voice that grew quieter and flatter with every single line that appeared. One neighbor wrote that a child so focused on drawing instead of joining team activities would probably struggle to make friends later in school. Another relative replied that starting consistent chores from a very young age usually prevented these kinds of messy habits from forming in the first place. Aaron had replied to several of the posts with laughing emojis, while Brandon added that he remembered being made to clean his room thoroughly every single day when he was young, and it never did him any harm at all. I watched my daughter's expression shift slowly from simple confusion into something much heavier and more painful to see. She set the tablet down carefully on the coffee table and stared at the glowing screen for a long, silent moment before she stood up without saying another word and walked straight down the hallway toward her bedroom. I followed a few careful steps behind her, trying to find the right words that wouldn't make everything feel even worse than it already did. When I reached her door, she was already inside the room, pulling open the bottom drawer where she kept all of her finished drawings stacked neatly by date. One by one, she took out the papers she had worked on for weeks. The bright cityscapes with tiny detailed windows, the animals with fur drawn in careful layers, the colorful scenes full of imagination that had taken her hours after school. She laid them across her bed in a straight row at first as if she were organizing them one last time, then suddenly grabbed the largest and most detailed one, the exact drawing she had shown proudly to everyone earlier at the BBQ. With both hands, she tore it straight down the middle in one quick motion. The sharp sound of ripping paper filled the quiet house and seemed to echo off the walls. She kept going without pausing, shredding piece after piece until bright, colorful fragments were scattered all across the bedroom floor like fallen leaves. "I'm going to fix it starting tonight," she said quietly, still not looking up at me while her fingers worked faster. "I'll organize everything better and keep my room perfect so they stop saying I'm not normal. Maybe if it looks just like the other kids' rooms, they won't talk about me like that anymore." Her hands moved even quicker now, crumpling what was left of the torn edges into smaller and smaller balls. I knelt down right beside her on the carpet and tried to gently gather some of the pieces together, but she shook her head firmly and kept working through the pile. Justin appeared silently in the doorway, leaning against the frame as he watched our daughter destroy months of her own hard work. He didn't rush into the room or try to stop her immediately. Instead, he stepped inside slowly and sat down on the very edge of the bed, picking up one small scrap that had landed near his shoe. He turned it over carefully in his fingers, studying the tiny, careful lines Avery had drawn with so much patience. The pile of shredded paper grew larger and larger on the floor around us. Avery's breathing came quicker and shallower now, but she stayed completely focused on the task in front of her, as if clearing away every single trace might somehow erase the comments she had read. I stayed right there close to her, speaking softly about how proud I was of every drawing, no matter what anyone else thought or said. She nodded once quickly, but didn't stop until almost every sheet from the drawer had been torn into pieces. When she finally sat back on her heels, surrounded by the colorful mess that used to be her favorite creations, she looked even smaller than her 9 years. Justin placed the single scrap he had been holding gently onto the bed beside him and stood up without a word. He glanced at me for just a brief second before turning back toward the doorway. The house felt unusually still for the rest of that evening, the normal sounds of bedtime replaced only by the faint rustle of paper whenever Avery shifted her weight on the floor. That night, the house stayed quiet long after Avery finally fell asleep on top of her covers. I sat on the edge of her bed for a while, brushing a few stray pieces of torn paper from her hair, then stepped out and closed the door softly behind me. Justin was already back at the kitchen table with his laptop open, the screen casting a pale glow across his face. He had been scrolling through the same group chat thread for the past hour, reading every single comment that had piled up since the BBQ ended. His jaw was tight, and he didn't look up when I walked in. I pulled out the chair across from him and waited. After a minute, he finally closed the laptop lid and leaned back, rubbing his eyes with one hand. "She tore up everything she worked on for weeks," I said quietly. She told me she's going to fix herself, so they stopped calling her not normal. Justin nodded once, but his expression stayed hard. He didn't offer any quick reassurances or try to downplay what had happened. Instead, he stood up, walked to the counter, and poured himself a glass of water, drinking it slowly as if he were thinking through every step he wanted to take next. The next morning arrived with bright sunlight streaming through the kitchen windows. Avery came downstairs later than usual, her eyes still puffy from the night before. She ate her cereal in silence, pushing the pieces around the bowl without much appetite. Justin sat at the head of the table reading the newspaper, but I could tell his mind was somewhere else. When Avery finished and went back upstairs to get ready for the day, he finally spoke. "I'm not going to argue with them anymore," he said, his voice calm and steady. "I've decided what I'm going to do, and I don't need to fight about it." I asked him what he meant, but he only shook his head and told me he would handle it. He spent the rest of the morning at his desk in the home office, typing steadily on his keyboard and occasionally glancing at printed screenshots he had made of the group chat. I could hear the printer running every few minutes as he gathered more evidence. Around lunchtime he came out, grabbed his car keys, and said he needed to run a quick errand. He didn't explain where he was going, and I didn't push him. The house felt tense but also strangely focused, like we were all waiting for something important to shift. By early afternoon, Avery had started reorganizing her room on her own. She lined up her remaining art supplies in perfect rows on the shelves and folded her clothes with extra care. Every time I walked past her door, she looked up with a small, determined smile, as if she were proving to herself that she could change fast enough to make the comments stop. My heart ached watching her, but I let her work because interrupting might only make her feel worse. Justin returned home around 3 o'clock, carrying a small stack of papers. He placed them on the kitchen counter without saying much, then went straight back to his laptop. That evening, after dinner, when Avery was in the bath, Justin finally turned the screen toward me so I could see what he had been working on. He had compiled a clear timeline of every monthly transfer he had made to his parents over the past several years, along with copies of the messages where they had asked for more help with bills and repairs. The numbers added up to thousands of dollars each month. He didn't look angry anymore, just resolved. "They crossed a line yesterday," he said simply, "and I'm not letting it slide this time." I nodded, feeling a mix of relief and nervousness settle in my chest. Avery came downstairs in her pajamas a few minutes later, hugged me goodnight, and headed back to her freshly organized room. Justin stayed up late again, making final adjustments to whatever he planned to post. The house was quiet once more, but this time the silence felt different, heavier with purpose instead of just pain. The following morning, Justin woke up earlier than usual and went straight to his laptop without stopping for coffee. I could hear the keys clicking steadily from the kitchen while I made breakfast for Avery. She came downstairs wearing her favorite blue shirt, her hair brushed neatly, and sat at the table trying to act like everything was back to normal. She even helped set the plates without being asked, something she rarely did on school days. Justin barely looked up from the screen, but I noticed his shoulders were tense in a way that told me he had made his final decision overnight. When Avery finished eating and went upstairs to grab her backpack, Justin finally closed the laptop and turned to me. "I'm not arguing with my mother or anyone else about this," he said, his voice low and firm. "There's no point in another family meeting or phone call where they twist everything around. I've already prepared everything I need to say, and I'm posting it today." He didn't raise his voice or wait for my opinion. He simply stood up, poured himself a quick glass of water, and carried the laptop to the living room couch where the light was better. I sat down beside him and watched as he opened the neighborhood group page and the family chat at the same time. His fingers moved quickly as he attached the screenshots he had printed the day before. Every comment from the BBQ, every laughing emoji Aaron had sent, every casual remark Brandon had made. He also included a clear list showing the exact amounts he had transferred to his parents each month for the past 5 years. The total was more than $26,000 a year. He typed a short message above the images, explaining that he would no longer be providing any financial support starting immediately, and that the public comments about our daughter had crossed a line he could not ignore. Before he hit post, he read the whole thing out loud to me once. It was calm, factual, and left no room for debate. No insults, no long, emotional speech. Just the plain truth about what had happened and what he was choosing to do. I nodded, feeling my stomach tighten, but I didn't ask him to wait or soften any part of it. Avery came back downstairs right as he was about to click send. She saw us sitting together and gave a small smile, then headed out the door for the school bus without asking what we were doing. The moment Justin pressed the button, the posts went live in both groups. Within minutes, the first reactions started appearing. Some neighbors liked the post but didn't comment. A couple of distant relatives sent private messages asking what was going on. Aaron sent a string of question marks followed by a shocked emoji. Brandon stayed completely silent. Justin didn't reply to any of them. He simply closed the laptop again and stood up, rolling his shoulders like he had just finished a long shift at work. The rest of the day passed in a strange kind of quiet. I kept checking my phone every few minutes, expecting an explosion of calls or messages, but the groups remained eerily still. Avery came home from school talking about a science project, acting more like her old self, though I could still see the careful way she kept her room tidy when she went upstairs to change. Justin spent the afternoon mowing the lawn and fixing a loose board on the back deck, staying busy with his hands while his mind stayed somewhere else. By dinner time, the silence in the groups had turned into a few careful comments from people trying to stay neutral. No one defended Patricia directly, and no one criticized Justin either. It felt like the entire neighborhood was holding its breath, waiting to see what would happen next. Justin ate quietly across from me and Avery, occasionally glancing at his phone but never picking it up to respond. The decision had been made, and now we were simply living with whatever came after it. By the next afternoon, the silence in both groups had broken wide open. Justin's post sat at the top of the neighborhood page with dozens of views already, the screenshots of every comment from the BBQ clearly visible next to the long list of monthly transfers. He had written only a few calm sentences explaining that the public remarks about our daughter had gone too far and that he was ending all financial help to his parents effective immediately. No anger, no name-calling, just facts and a simple boundary. The first replies came slowly at first. A neighbor posted a thumbs-up emoji and nothing else. Another wrote that family matters should stay private, but several others liked the comment without adding words. Then Erin's name appeared. She typed a long message asking why Justin would air everything in public instead of talking like adults. Brandon stayed quiet for almost an hour before finally posting a short line saying he was disappointed in how his brother had handled things. Patricia had not commented yet, but I knew she had seen it, because the read receipts showed activity from her account. Justin sat at the kitchen table, refreshing the page every few minutes without saying much. When Patricia finally replied, her message was short and sharp. She called the post unfair and claimed she had only been expressing concern as a grandmother. She asked how Justin could cut off support after everything they had done for him over the years. Justin read it once, then typed a reply that was even shorter than hers. He reminded everyone of the exact words spoken in the backyard, attached one more screenshot of the laughing emojis, and repeated that the financial support was over. He ended by saying he would not be responding to any further messages on the topic. Within minutes, the group chat exploded with notifications. Some people tried to play peacemaker with generic advice about forgiveness. Others simply stopped commenting altogether and left the group. Aaron sent Justin a private text demanding a phone call, but he left it unread. Brandon tried calling Justin's phone twice, letting it ring until voicemail picked up each time. The neighborhood page grew quieter again as people realized this was not a discussion they wanted to be part of. That evening, Patricia called the house phone. I answered by mistake and heard her voice immediately rise. She demanded to speak to Justin and said this was no way to treat family. Justin took the receiver from my hand, listened for less than 30 seconds, then spoke clearly. "Mom, the support stops today. We will not be discussing Avery's room or her drawings again. If you want to talk about anything else, fine, but this topic is closed." He hung up without waiting for a reply. The phone rang again almost immediately, this time from Michael's number. Justin let it go to voicemail. A text came through from Aaron saying the whole family was shocked and hurt. Justin read it, then turned his phone face down on the counter and went to help Avery with her homework. She looked up at him with wide eyes but didn't ask what was happening. He sat beside her at the table, explaining math problems in his usual patient voice, as if the outside world had gone quiet. Later that night, when Avery was asleep, Justin and I sat on the couch with the lights low. He told me he had already contacted the bank to stop the automatic transfers and change the passwords on any shared accounts. The decision felt heavy in the room, but also final. The posts were still visible, the comments still there for anyone to read, and the family that had once gathered so easily in the backyard now felt miles away. For the first time in days, the house held a different kind of quiet, one that came from choosing our own boundaries instead of waiting for someone else to respect them. The weekend arrived with a heavy sky and the kind of quiet that made every small sound feel louder than usual. Justin had just finished breakfast when the doorbell rang twice in quick succession. I looked through the front window and saw Michael standing on the porch with Patricia right beside him, both of them dressed as if they had come for a serious talk. Aaron and Brandon pulled up in a separate car a moment later and joined them on the steps. Justin didn't move from the kitchen table at first. He simply set his coffee cup down and waited. When the doorbell rang a third time, louder this time, Justin walked to the door but did not open it. He spoke through the wooden panel instead, his voice steady and clear enough for everyone outside to hear. "We are not doing this in person today. The financial support is finished, and we will not be discussing Avery or her habits again. If you want to talk about something else, we can arrange a time later. Otherwise, please leave." Patricia's voice came back immediately, sharp and raised, insisting that they deserved a proper conversation after years of helping with bills and repairs. Michael added that cutting family off like this was unfair and selfish. Justin stayed calm on our side of the door. He reminded them once more of the exact words spoken in the backyard and the public comments that had followed. He mentioned the screenshots still visible in the group and repeated that the decision was final. Aaron tried to speak up from the porch, saying the whole family felt blindsided and that Brandon agreed it was too extreme. Brandon stayed mostly silent, only muttering something about how brothers should handle things privately. Justin listened without interrupting, then answered that privacy had already been broken the moment the comments were made in front of neighbors and relatives. Avery appeared at the top of the stairs, drawn by the voices. She stood there in her pajamas, holding the railing with both hands, listening to her grandparents argue through the closed door. I motioned for her to stay where she was and walked over to stand beside Justin. He reached out and took my hand for a brief second before letting go. The conversation outside continued for several more minutes, with Patricia demanding to see Avery and Michael warning that actions like this could damage relationships forever. Justin replied only once more, telling them clearly that contact with Avery would also be limited from now on until trust could be rebuilt, which he did not see happening soon. Eventually, the voices on the porch grew quieter. Car doors opened and closed. Engines started. We waited until both vehicles had pulled away down the street before Justin turned the deadbolt and stepped back from the door. He looked tired but not regretful. Avery came down the stairs slowly and asked if everything was okay. Justin knelt in front of her and said simply that sometimes grown-ups have to make hard choices to protect their family, and that she had done nothing wrong. She nodded, though her eyes still held questions she didn't voice. The rest of the weekend passed without any more visits or calls. The group chats remained mostly silent except for a few people who quietly left the neighborhood page. Justin spent time fixing things around the house while I took Avery to the park for a long walk. She talked more freely than she had in days, sketching small pictures on a notepad she brought along. By Sunday evening, the house felt steadier, as if a line had been drawn that could not be crossed again. The weeks that followed settled into a new kind of routine. Patricia and Michael listed their house for sale within the first month after the automatic transfers stopped. Without the monthly support that had helped cover property taxes and maintenance, they could no longer afford the large suburban home they had lived in for over 20 years. A for sale sign appeared on their front lawn, and within 6 weeks they accepted an offer and moved to a smaller apartment 2 states away. Neighbors later mentioned that the couple had quietly stopped attending the monthly block parties and community meetings they once hosted. Aaron tried reaching out a few more times with messages that grew shorter and more frustrated, but Justin never replied. Brandon eventually sent one final text saying he understood the decision even if he didn't agree with how it was handled, and then he too stopped contacting us. The neighborhood group chat slowly returned to normal topics like yard sales and school events, but the names Reynolds appeared less and less. A few people who had been close to Patricia told me privately that she had started attending a different church across town, citing family differences when asked why she left the local one. Avery continued to draw, though she kept her new sketches in a smaller notebook she carried with her instead of spreading them across her room. She still organized her space carefully each evening, but the frantic need to prove something had begun to fade. We enrolled her in an after-school art club, where the teacher praised her imagination without any conditions. On weekends, the three of us started taking short drives to nearby parks or museums, simple outings that felt lighter than they had in months. Justin and I talked more openly about boundaries and what protecting our daughter really meant. He never expressed regret about the choice he made that day after the BBQ. The bank confirmed the transfers had ended cleanly, and any shared financial documents were updated or closed. Life moved forward without the constant background noise of family expectations that had once dictated so many of our decisions. Looking back now, the hardest part wasn't the confrontation at the door or the silent weeks that followed. It was realizing how quickly public words spoken in a backyard could wound a child, and how long those wounds might last if left unaddressed. We learned that sometimes the most loving thing a parent can do is draw a firm line, even when it means walking away from people who were supposed to be the safest support system. Protecting our daughter's confidence and sense of self became more important than keeping the peace at any cost. Today, our home feels steadier. Avery laughs more freely when she shows us her latest drawings, and Justin and I make decisions together without waiting for approval from anyone outside our front door. The experience taught us that family is not defined only by blood or tradition, but by who chooses to build a safe space every single day. In the end, choosing our small family over toxic patterns was the clearest decision we ever made, and one we have never second-guessed.